Hello and welcome to Let's Improv a Story, where we try to play a sort of improvisational writer's room and create a story for usually some well-known intellectual property or character. It's fun to do, and the difference between this and fanfic is always that, well, with fanfic you can do anything, but we're trying to do something that could have been or could be or, could get through a studio or a book publisher, or would just continue on the way something's been going before. So, today, let's take, let's say, a very popular character like Spider-Man. And, when you're trying to write something for Spider-Man, you sort of want to figure out, what does this character do? Who is this character? And, then what can I do to the character? Now, of course, Spider-Man, Peter Parker, is, a little bit like Superman, right? They're both like a total heart of gold. And Spider-Man has his, traumatic backstory, a great power, great responsibility. And that's something that's kind of unbreakable with him. A little bit like the rule that Uncle Ben can't come back. So for Spider-Man and his great power, great responsibility dynamic, he's always going to do the right thing. And, that contributes to the Parker luck and his inability to have things go well in his life, and which also plays into the soap opera angle of Spider-Man, which is always part of the initial hook back from the Stan Lee Ditko days. So, the trick with Spider-Man, though, is if you're analyzing his character, the temptation is to test the great power, great responsibility angle, and to put something out there that is so tempting for him that he will ignore his Spider-Man duties and focus on his Peter Parker life and improving that. But, when you think about that, it becomes difficult to do, and it becomes, I think, anathema to the character. That is who he is. He won't do that. Superman will be optimistic, Batman will brood, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Spider-Man is going to do the right thing, and he's lost many friendships and jobs and romantic relationships, etc., to that time and time again. So I don't know that it's worth trying to do that. I mean, there's an interesting thing going on early here in the Jonathan Hickman Ultimate Spider-Man run, where Spider-Man gets his powers later on in life, and he's already got a marriage with Mary Jane and 2 kids. Because the ultimate way to probably test what Spider-Man would do vis-a-vis his great power, great responsibility, self-sacrificing dynamic is, well, I mean, I don't know, what if one of his kids has an ear infection or something and a low fever, and he needs to stay home with them for the night, but, there's a fire a few blocks away, and 10 people might, burn to death. What is Spider-Man going to do? I mean, generally, the dynamic is he sacrifices his personal life in order to save anyone else, because he once upon a time didn't help out and stop a criminal, and that criminal killed his Uncle Ben. And from then on, every time he doesn't stop someone bad, well, it could be someone else's Uncle Ben who dies that day. And every time he stops another criminal is a time where he saved someone else's Uncle Ben. This is a tangent, but a great piece in the Scott Snyder, not Zack Snyder, but the writer for DC Comics, Scott Snyder's run on Batman with Greg Capullo, the artist, is a bit where Alfred is talking to Bruce and saying, you've got to stop punishing us. And Bruce is like, what are you talking about? And Alfred says, well, you've got to stop punishing us because the better you are at being Batman, the more people you save, it really is truly the more child Bruce Waynes you're saving. It's the more, Martha and Thomas Waynes you're saving. You're showing the world that it could have been done, that the world could have saved your parents and prevented the tragedy that befell, young Bruce Wayne outside of, Monarch Theater and Crime Alley, etc. And that was, Alfred's angle on that, which is, I'm not quite sure that's why Batman's doing what he's doing, but at least in that moment, it's a fascinating idea for it. And so that's relatable to, every time Spidey is saving someone, he's saving someone else's Uncle Ben. But then again, in this new Hickman situation, storyline, he's got children. And, is he going to let 10 people burn to death in a burning building 6 blocks away that he can see the glow and the smoke of the fire just so he can stay home with his kid who's got a totally normal earache and a low fever? Or is he going to be like, oh, they're sleeping pretty good. Let me go just swing out here and like save 10 lives. And I'm really curious if that's going to happen in the Hickman run. It's a great way of testing the self-sacrificing nature of it. Because in that situation, you found a good way to test his great power, great responsibility, self-sacrificing nature, but you've also put the reader in an impossible situation of, do you root for someone to take care of their child, which is, kind of almost number one on the list of the good things you should be doing in life? Or do you root for them to neglect their sick child while they go save 10 lives, 10 Uncle Bens? That's a real thorny situation, and one I'm not quite sure they'll actually run with in the Hickman storyline, because you put the reader's opinion of Spider-Man, it's you can't win. It's a no-win scenario. It's a catch-22. You're going to have people who think, like, how dare you neglect your child, Spider-Man? I don't like you anymore. Or people who say, like, hey, just leave your kid alone. That sucks and all, but you've got to save 10 people's lives. And that's a tough one. But it is a good conundrum to put Spider-Man in. But it, I think, speaks to the levels you have to go to when you are trying to, as a writer, attack the core of Spider-Man, the self-sacrificing nature of Peter Parker. So I think a better angle to take for creating a Spider-Man story is something more along the lines of, well, Spider-Man is a fun character. It is fun to be around Spider-Man. When he swings into a scene, you're happy. You're glad to see him. His costume is fun. His powers are fun. He's jokey and humorous and fun. He's a positive person. He's a good hang. Pun intended. So maybe you don't need to attack his character. Maybe just putting him in a fun story is the way to go. Because if it's just fun to hang out with Spider-Man, well, what do you do with people who are fun to hang out with? You have a party. So just have a fun party with Spider-Man. Come up with a fun story. You don't need to fill him with drama. Now, of course, you can surround him with soap opera-y drama and stuff like that. Though, is that stuff really the most successful? I mean, a good question, another quick tangent is, if you were reading a Spider-Man comic book or whatever, watching a movie, and if he never took off his mask, would you really be bothered? In the movies, you've got talented, famous, handsome actors, etc. And it's harder to get expressiveness out of the costume in the movies, in the live-action ones. Obviously, Spider-Verse does it fantastically. But Spider-Verse is, using animation techniques and also comic book techniques. And comic book techniques, also have thought boxes or bubbles and stuff, and can also be more animated and unrealistic in the drawing, the illustration of Spider-Man. So you can get across his feelings. That Spider-Man mask really looks like a mask in the movies, even when it's like a CGI mask in the Marvel ones. But when you take it and put it in the comics, it's a face, and an expressive one. His eyes are so big, any modulation in the shape of, those post-Todd McFarlane large Spider-Man mask eyes will tell you so much, because, so much of our emotion is translated or communicated through our eyes. Therefore, if Spider-Man's just a fun hang that you want to throw a party of a storyline for, then it really just comes down to doing fun things with him. You can go essentially the Chris Claremont route. Chris Claremont, on his run in the X-Men, would constantly, basically you could tell he saw a movie. It's like, oh, Chris Claremont saw Star Wars. Here comes the Shi'ar storyline. It's like, oh, Chris Claremont saw Ghostbusters. Here comes Inferno, which literally has Ghostbusters cameoing, basically. Or Chris Claremont saw Conan the Barbarian, and he has a out-of-nowhere 2-issue run, which actually has Spider-Man in it, where Manhattan gets turned into a sort of Conan the Barbarian land, and, Storm and Colossus, and I think Captain America's there. Everyone gets, nice, not shiny, barbarian outfits. So you can do that with Spider-Man pretty easy. You could do something where, So what could we do? Um, Now, I took one swing at the idea of a Spider-Man, a storyline that would like kind of really attack his character. And my idea was mostly like Dante's Inferno, sort of Spidey's Inferno. You take Spider-Man and you have him essentially go to, Dante's Inferno goes to a very stylized, interesting version of hell with different levels and stuff like that. And so you have Spidey essentially go into the afterlife and meet the souls or ghosts, etc., of all the people he's saved but have passed on. And then at like another level, all the people he has, it would be maybe not been able to save because he was doing other things, saving other people. Or, more specifically, in the end, or towards the end, all the people he couldn't save, which of course would climax with meeting, the ghost of Uncle Ben, which sounds a little silly to say, but would be a pretty powerful scene. I mean, Peter getting to reconcile with Uncle Ben after, his life-forming tragedy would be an extraordinary moment. And I think we're so far deep into the Spider-Man mythos and life that it wouldn't change who he is. He wouldn't be like, all right, maybe I can be a little selfish. I'm going to not save that life and stay home and eat a donut. But, that's an interesting thing, and it would be a fun, not fun, but it would be an interesting little trip, but it seems kind of one note. Again, because Spider-Man's not really going to change. Him meeting Uncle Ben's ghost is powerful, and you could work that in somewhere else. But even that starts to break the don't bring Uncle Ben back rule. And I think it's worth not breaking that rule. So really, again, if he's just a fun character and you want to have a fun hang, then, do the Claremont thing. Find a fun thing that happens, like Spider-Man Fast and the Furious, or Spider-Man Godzilla, or like Spider-Man Indiana Jones, which I think sounds like a lot of fun. And you can picture like a J. Scott Campbell cover with Spider-Man in a, Indiana Jones hat and jacket and with a web whip or something, which sounds adorable. So, then, you throw him in a jungle, and there's like a sort of strange ziggurat that is hopefully not culturally appropriated, but is distinguished enough, especially if it's, you don't want to like just grab something from some other culture. That's not something we do these days, and it's been done a lot. So you'd want to do something fresh anyway. So, it could be like a portal or whatever which is a little bit Stargatey, to like an alien planet or whatever. And maybe there's, he's got to have a reason for being down there. So that's probably something, a friend of his, it could be Mary Jane and her new boyfriend went on a backpacking trip, and then she was FaceTiming him, and there was some sort of attack or something, and, it cut off. So what's Spidey going to do? He's going to hop on a plane like Indy and with some red dashed lines behind him, jet off to a foreign land. And, you could have a little bit of Spidey in a new place, Spidey investigating things. And finally, you get to the ziggurat, and he's a smart guy. There's always the science aspect of Peter Parker. He invented those web shooters foundationally. And he would just, I guess, he'd discover the portal. What next? He'd have to go through it, and then you've got to figure out, like, what attacked Mary Jane. You've got to figure out what's on the other side. And if it's some portal, is it multiverse? There's a lot of multiverses now, so maybe not that. It's been done a lot. So, I don't know, some alien place, Spidey in space. But maybe not space, not in a spacesuit doing a spacewalk. That gets maybe a little too out there, or a little too... It's very cold in space, often narratively as well. So you want to keep him on some alien ground. So put him somewhere. Well, now you got to come up with like a unique alien thing. And there's been a gazillion billion aliens throughout comics history and everywhere else. So maybe we take a little idea from that Spidey's Inferno idea, which is ghosts and spirits in the afterlife, and take something like a place where there's a bunch of like husk bodies, and there are sort of spirits floating above, and they can, for a time, inhabit a husk body once. And then they can leave it, and some other spirit can inhabit it. And so maybe at one point they were sort of explorers and created these portals to other worlds to look around. But other worlds are so different from them. They have sort of spirits attached to bodies and are not able to leave them at will or then go to a new one. So they mostly have stayed in their own place. And if there's sort of zombie-like husks on the ground, but they look, humanoid, and they look fine. They're not like rotten. And there's sort of spirits floating above. And there's kind of a very probably kind of ranch-like setup with the husks below and a more, spirit society up above. And then the spirits come down. There's sort of like a middle society as well, a middle world where you've got probably the majority actually living lives in different, bodies, in husk bodies. So the sort of spirit husk world is the place Spidey would arrive to. And I guess, maybe some husks got loose and went through, or an old portal he didn't know was activated that went to the sort of like Amazon, excursion Mary Jane and her boyfriend were on. And those husks maybe the husks tend to congregate near spirits. And so they sense the spirits of or the life of Mary Jane and her boyfriend, and perhaps they attack them because a human, life, soul, consciousness, spirit, or whatever is permanently attached to our bodies for our life. And perhaps the husks viewed that as if the spirits they're used to were trapped in a husk, and so they wanted to free them and just acted instinctively, and that was perceived as an attack. I mean, it would be an attack as well from a human perspective, but not from the sort of spirit husk world perspective. Anyway, so, you can't just have Spidey land in this unique environment. The spirit husk idea is interesting, and they could have their own sort of society built around these three parts of it. But it needs something else. You need some conflict, you need some action, you need probably some pressure on that society you created. So, I mean, you could take a situation where, if you got Spidey and Mary Jane there's a romance angle, so you could then twin that with a romance angle on the sort of spirit husk world. So there could be, maybe they at one point went to another place, like the Skrull homeworld, and there's a Skrull warlord, and she fell in love with a spirit husk person when they were in one of the bodies, and she thought they died when their spirit left the husk. But then the husk, eventually, got out of its coffin and walked away. And they were eventually able to track it, follow the portal, whatever, back to the spirit husk world. And this warlord she's very mad about what was done to her. She feels like it was a betrayal or a prank or whatever you want to call it, an injustice. And so she started to attack the spirit husk world, which now Spidey and Mary Jane's boyfriend are all in the middle of, as this Skrull warlord tries to find her former, the person she was in, the spirit she was in a relationship with. From there, what do you want to do? You want to, you're going to want to resolve that storyline. You're going to want, Spidey in the middle of it, Mary Jane and her boyfriend to help out some. Their angle is probably to be the window onto the spirit husk society, and just what you can create culturally there and sort of build out some world building, which is probably too much for this podcast to deal with right now. But storyline wise, you're going to want to get the boyfriend spirit and the girlfriend warlord together at some point. But we're dealing with spirits leaving bodies and spirits going into different bodies. And this is a Spider-Man comic, so it's only fair and only really interesting if we play with all the toys with our main character, especially if he's not going to change. And we're just here to play. Let's play as much as we can. So, with that in mind, at some point, Spider-Man has to encounter some technology where he is separated from his body and his spirit is separated and leaves it. Perhaps, to get through the Skrull defenses up to their battleship or whatever, he needs to use his science smarts to activate a piece of older technology that would manually separate a spirit from a body. Perhaps there were some sort of incarceration jurisprudence system where If someone, a spirit in a husk, does a crime, and they don't want to leave that body, the justice system will remove them from that body. So A, they can't do, I guess, a physical crime, and B, that husk can then go on to, be the host of a different spirit who, hopefully won't do crimes. So you get Spidey to leave his body, and let's say the only way to get the spirit over to the Skrull warlord former girlfriend partner is to put that boyfriend spirit in Spidey's body. So you have Spidey, see, this is fun. You have Spidey the spirit guiding and instructing the spider husk body with the boyfriend spirit in the Spider-Man body. And then that goes up to the Skrull ship, and they reconcile. And so you sort of have Spidey like a coach on the sideline of a very inexperienced player. And yeah, anyway, they will eventually reconcile, and the spirit will apologize, and the warlord leaves, and, Spidey gets his spirit back in his body, and he gets Mary Jane and her boyfriend home. And you could even have a thing at the end where Spidey feels, it's like, oh, it's good to be around Mary Jane. I feel alive, and she's on one of my Spider-Man adventures, and, I don't want, she's been on so many of these, she can take care of herself, and it's almost like having a partner, and Spidey, towards the end, as they're getting out, kind of feels alive, and then you can have especially if you tee the artist up for this, and they might get it anyway, there are many brilliant artists working today, you could have Mary Jane and her boyfriend leave, and you could have, I don't know, maybe like the shadow of Peter in like one of those steamy smokestacks in New York or something that looks, up in the air behind them, almost as if his life is leaving the sort of host of their relationship, that he likes being around her. That's the life he likes, but, he's not a part of now. Part of the whole, one more day thing, and the whole, they don't want to divorce Spider-Man or a married Spider-Man at Marvel Comics. And, there's an argument to be made for that. So, that'd be an interesting final image to give a little bit of juice and drama to the story that's actually on Spider-Man's shoulders. And, it also underlines again the sort of the great power, great responsibility, and Spider-Man's true nature of self-sacrifice. And it's always good to reinforce that, and that is a good bit of drama. You can't do it all the time because it becomes very one note, but it's good as a sort of cherry on top. It's a good way to end the story. So, there you go. We've got a Spider-Man story that we have improv'd. He didn't go to hell. We didn't do Spidey's Inferno. We sent him to an alien planet with kind of a spooky society. And we got to involve Mary Jane, and it's a Skrull attack, and Spidey left his body and had to, as a spirit, coach someone else in his body, which reminds me a little bit of the Superior Spider-Man arc, but in that point, they're in conflict, basically. I think only in the last, I don't want to spoil it. But, so that was a fun time. That was good. So we did it. We improv'd a story. I'll see you next time. I guess I didn't even introduce myself at the end. Who am I? It's a mystery. Tune in next time, everybody. But no, I'm online under the name Throwaway Lines, and it's been fun. I look forward to doing it again. Everyone have a good day. See you next time.